It's just past 11 at night. April 13th, 1699. A little village in the north of England. A 9-year-old girl named Jane opens her eyes in the dark, and she's not confused. She's not scared. She's not lying there wondering why she woke up at 11 at night. Because for Jane, waking up in the middle of the night was the most normal thing in the world. Everybody did it. Her mother did it. Her grandparents did it. Kings did it. Farmers did it. And they had a name for the sleep she'd just come out of. They called it her first sleep. Now hold on. First sleep. That means there was a second one. And that means for hundreds of years, actually for thousands of years, human beings did not sleep the way you slept last night. You go to bed, you sleep for 8 hours in one solid block. You wake up. One sleep. Done. But that's brand new. That's a modern invention. Historically speaking, it's basically a fad. For most of human history, people went to bed, slept for a few hours, then woke up in the middle of the night on purpose, wide awake, for 1 to 2 hours, and then they went back to sleep for a second shift until morning. And here's the part that's really going to mess with your head. What did they actually do during that middle of the night wake-up? Oh, everything. They prayed, they talked, they visited neighbors, they committed crimes, they wrote down their dreams, they made a lot of babies. We'll get to that. This is one of the wildest, most overlooked stories in the history of being human. By the end of this, you're going to understand why you wake up at 3 in the morning and panic when your ancestors would have woken up at 3 in the morning and thought, right on schedule. We're going to cover where the two-sleep system came from, how it actually worked, the murder case that revealed it, the science that proved it, and the single invention that killed it forever. Stay with me, because your relationship with sleep is about to change. So, how do we even know any of this? Let me introduce you to a man named Roger Ekirch. He's a historian, and in the early 1990s, he was working on a book about something nobody had ever really written about before: the history of nighttime. Not events that happened at night. Night itself. What people did when the sun went down. When it came time to write the chapter on sleep, Ekirch was, honestly, dreading it. He figured, come on, sleep is sleep. You lie down, you close your eyes. Humans have always done it the same way. Boring. Nothing to discover. He could not have been more wrong. Ekirch had figured out that some of the best sources for how regular people actually lived weren't fancy history books. They were court records, crime depositions. Because when someone testifies about a robbery or a murder, they accidentally describe their whole ordinary life around it. What they ate, where they slept, what time they woke up. And one day, buried in the testimony of that little girl Jane from a murder case, he reads 2 words that stop him cold. First sleep. Not sleep. First sleep. Said so casually, like it needed no explanation at all. Ekirch has this moment. You know the feeling, where a tiny detail suddenly cracks open into something enormous. Because first sleep only makes sense if there's a second sleep, which means the night was split in 2, which means everything he assumed about sleep being a biological constant might be completely wrong. So he starts digging, and it's not just one document, it's everywhere. He finds first sleep and second sleep mentioned over and over, in diaries, in letters, in medical textbooks, in plays, in poems, in legal testimony, hundreds and hundreds of references. It's in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, it's in Homer's Odyssey, that's from the 8th century BC. It's in Virgil's Aeneid, which literally describes the hour which terminates the first sleep. These aren't obscure texts. These are the greatest hits of Western literature, and they're all casually referencing a sleep schedule we completely forgot existed. And it wasn't just England. In France, they called the first sleep the premier somme. In Italy, primo sonno. Ekirch found traces of this two-sleep habit in Africa, in South America, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East. This wasn't a quirk. This was how humanity slept. Think about what that means. For thousands of years, across nearly every culture, in almost every corner of the planet, people split their night into two. And then, in just a couple of generations, it vanished so completely that when a historian rediscovered it, it sounded like science fiction. So the question becomes, what did this two-sleep life actually look like? What did you do when you woke up at midnight? Let me walk you through a single night, the way your great-great-great-grandparents lived it. It's around 9 o'clock in the evening. There's no scrolling, there's barely any light. A candle was expensive, and the cheap version was a rushlight, a dried reed dipped in fat. Once the sun's gone, the day's basically over. So people did the logical thing. They went to bed. And bed is doing a lot of work in that sentence. If you were wealthy, you had a mattress stuffed with feathers, middle of the road, straw or rags. And if you were poor, you slept on a pile of heather or a bare earth floor, maybe no blanket. Welcome to the good old days. Oh, and you were never alone. Beds were shared, not just with your family, with servants, with friends. And if you were traveling and stopped at an inn, you might share a bed with a total stranger. Just, "Hi, I'm Thomas. Budge over." There were actual rules for this. Where you slept in the bed depended on your age, your gender, and whether you were family. It was a whole social choreography every single night just to lie down. So you fall asleep around 9 or 10 o'clock, and you sleep hard for a couple of hours. That's your first sleep. Then somewhere around midnight, give or take, you just wake up, naturally. No alarm, no noise. Alarms didn't even exist yet. Your body simply surfaces out of sleep, wide awake and calm. And this window, this quiet hour or two in the dead of night, had a name. They called it the watch. The watch was precious. It was this strange, dreamy, in-between time that belonged entirely to you. So what did people do with it? Honestly, anything and everything. Some people got up and did chores. They'd tend to the fire, check on the animals, patch their clothes. One servant that Ekirch found actually brewed a batch of beer for her boss between midnight and 2 in the morning. Just casually brewing beer in the middle of the night, as you do. For a lot of people, the watch was holy. Christians had specific prayers written for exactly this hour. One writer called it the most profitable hour of the whole night because the world was asleep, everything was quiet, and in his words, no one will look for you except for God. Monks were literally required to get up at midnight to pray. Thinkers loved it too. Philosophers used the watch to sit with their thoughts. One London inventor even created a special little device called the nocturnal remembrancer, a pad you could write on in the dark so you wouldn't forget your best midnight ideas. That's a 3 a.m. notes app from the 1700s. But you know what the watch was most used for? 2 things, talking and romance. People would lie there in the dark and just chat. There's something about that hour, half asleep, no distractions, no daylight pressure, where people opened up, real conversations, the kind that are hard to have in the busy light of day. And couples? A 16th century French physician actually credited the fertility of hardworking laborers to exactly this window, because after that first sleep, he wrote, they had more energy and, quote, do it better. So yes, historically, a lot of humanity was conceived at 1 in the morning during the watch. You are, statistically, kind of a product of this. Then, after an hour or two of the watch, your eyelids get heavy again. You lie back down for your second sleep, the morning sleep, which carries you all the way through to dawn. 2 clean shifts of rest with a peaceful little island of wakefulness in between. And to them, completely, utterly normal. Which raises the obvious question. If this was normal for thousands of years, why doesn't anybody do it now? What happened? Where did the second sleep go? Before we get to that, though, I've got to be honest with you. The watch wasn't all prayers and pillow talk and beer brewing. Because if everyone's awake in the dark in the middle of the night, so are the people you don't want awake in the dark in the middle of the night. Remember the murder case that started this whole discovery? Let's go back to it, because the 2-sleep world had a shadow. Little Jane Routh and her mother wake from their first sleep. The mother gets up, lights her pipe by the fire, and then 2 men appear at the window. They call her outside, and here's the chilling part. She seems to have been expecting them. She whispers to her daughter to lie still, and she would come again in the morning. She never came back. That night, Jane's mother was murdered. The case was never solved, and it was Jane's testimony, her casual mention of waking from her first sleep, that 300 years later unlocked this entire forgotten history. She wasn't the only dark story. Ekirch found a man named Luke Atkinson who used the gap between his 2 sleeps to slip out and commit crimes. His own wife said he'd used that midnight window to sneak into other people's houses for, and I quote, sinister deeds. Think about it. The watch was perfect cover. Everyone knew people were sometimes up and about in the middle of the night, but there were no street lights, no police as we know them, no cameras. If you wanted to do something in the dark was very, very available. And this is actually a big reason nighttime itself was so feared back then. It wasn't just spooky, it was genuinely dangerous. Fire could break out from a candle, you could freeze to death, there were thieves, and people genuinely believed the night belonged to evil forces, that the dark was almost literally enemy territory. So they took precautions before bed that sound insane to us now. They'd go on bug hunts through the mattress, because remember, you were sharing that bed with fleas and lice. They hung up magical amulets, they said protective prayers, they took strange potions that were supposed to guarantee safe sleep. Every single night was this little ritual of defending yourself against the dark, the cold, the critters, and the devil. So, when you complain that your mattress is a little too firm, just remember, nobody's currently trying to steal your first sleep by candlelight, while a stranger snores next to you and a flea plots your demise. Alright, so we've got this ancient, worldwide 2-sleep system. It's in the greatest books ever written. It's in murder trials. It shaped religion, romance, work, and crime. It lasted for thousands of years, and then in the span of roughly 1 century, it died. Not slowly faded, died. So completely that your own grandparents probably had no idea it ever existed. So what could possibly be powerful enough to rewrite how an entire species sleeps? Here's your first clue. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a plague. It wasn't a king passing a law. The thing that killed the second sleep was light, artificial light, and the machines that came with it. Because here's what almost nobody realizes. The way you sleep tonight was designed, accidentally, by the Industrial Revolution. Your 8-hour block isn't natural, it's industrial. It was, in a very real way, manufactured. And there's a scientist, decades later, in a lab, in almost total darkness, who took a group of ordinary modern men, stripped away their artificial light, and watched something ancient wake back up inside them. Their bodies literally rebuilt the two-sleep pattern from scratch, proving that it's not gone. It's still in you, right now. That experiment is one of the most fascinating things I have ever come across, and it changes what a good night's sleep even means. So, let's lock in what we know so far. For most of human history, we slept in two shifts, a first sleep and a second sleep. In between was the watch, a wide-awake hour where people prayed, worked, talked, loved, and occasionally got up to no good. It was global, it was ancient, it was normal. And it all got discovered because a little girl in 1699 casually mentioned two words in a murder trial. In part 2, we're going deep on the science, the lab experiment that recreated ancient sleep, what your brain and your hormones are actually doing at 3 in the morning, and why that panic you feel when you wake up in the night might be the most modern, most unnecessary feeling you have. Because once you understand this, you might never be scared of waking up at night again. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the stranger, and honestly, the more freeing this story gets. Last time, we discovered something wild. For thousands of years, humans slept in two shifts, with a wide-awake watch in the middle of the night. It was everywhere. Then, it vanished. But here's the thing. A historian finding old documents is one thing. Maybe people said they slept twice. Maybe it was exaggerated. Maybe it was just a poetic figure of speech. So the real question is this actually real? Is sleep baked into the human body, or was it just a habit, a cultural thing, like eating dinner at a certain hour? Well, in the early 1990s, a scientist accidentally answered that question, and what he found is honestly kind of spooky. Meet Dr. Thomas Wehr. He was a sleep scientist, and he wasn't even trying to prove anything about ancient history. His question was much simpler. What happens to human sleep when you take away artificial light? Really take it away. Not dim the lights, remove them entirely for weeks. Think about it. You and I are bathed in light for almost 16 hours a day. Screens, bulbs, street lights, the fridge light judging you at midnight. But for nearly all of human history, when the sun set, that was it. Long nights, deep darkness. Wehr wanted to give modern people that ancient darkness back and just watch. Here's the setup. He took a group of men, and first, for a week, he just observed them sleeping normally. One solid block, like all of us. Then he changed the rules. He cut their daylight from the usual 16 hours down to just 10. The other 14, darkness. No lamps, no screens, no music, no exercise. Just rest, in the dark, like it's the year 1300. 14 hours in a dark room every night with nothing to do. At first, that sounds like torture, but watch what their bodies did. For the first week or two, not much changed. They slept a lot because, honestly, most of us carry a little sleep debt, and given the chance, we'll gladly pay it back. But then, after about 4 weeks in this long darkness world, something shifted. Something nobody told them to do. Their single block of sleep split in two. They'd sleep for a stretch, then wake up, stay awake and calm for 1 to 3 hours, then fall back asleep for a second stretch. 2 sleeps, a watch in the middle. They had reinvented the exact pattern from Ekirch's dusty medieval documents without ever being told it existed. Now you might say, okay, they woke up in the night, big deal, people do that. But here's what makes this jaw-dropping. It wasn't just their behavior that changed, it was their biology. Wehr measured a hormone called melatonin. That's the chemical that controls your sleep-wake rhythm, your internal clock. And in these men, the melatonin pattern shifted to match the two-sleep schedule. This wasn't people being bored and getting up. This was the ancient human clock, the real one, switching back on now that the modern one had been turned off. Let that sink in. A historian reading 400-year-old murder trials and a scientist running a modern lab experiment independently found the exact same thing. The words on the old pages and the data on the new machines lined up perfectly. That's about as close as history and science ever get to shaking hands and saying, yep, this was real. And when Ekirch first read about Wehr's experiment, he said it was one of the most exciting moments of his entire life, right up there with his wedding and the birth of his kids. That's how big this was. So here's the takeaway, and it's a significant one. That two-sleep pattern doesn't appear to be a lost cultural habit like wearing powdered wigs. It appears to be your body's natural default, a setting that's still installed in you right now. Give your body long enough nights and deep enough darkness, and it may very well go right back to sleeping in two shifts. Which leads to a genuinely mind-bending idea. The way you sleep, the 8-hour block you think of as normal, the thing every health article tells you to chase, that might be the artificial one. And the broken, interrupted sleep that makes you anxious at 3 in the morning, that might be your body doing exactly what it was designed to do. We've had it backwards this whole time, but to really understand why, we need to talk about what's happening inside your body during the night. Because your internal clock is way more interesting than you might think. Okay, quick and simple science. No jargon, I promise. Inside your brain, you have a master clock. It's tiny, but it runs your entire day. It tells you when to feel sleepy, when to feel alert, when to get hungry, when your body temperature should drop. This is your circadian rhythm. Circadian just means about a day. And the number one thing that sets this clock is light. Bright light says daytime, be awake. Darkness says nighttime, wind down. Simple, elegant. And for millions of years, it worked perfectly. Because the only light show in town was the sun. Here's the problem. Your ancient clock can't tell the difference between the sun and your phone. When you stare at a bright screen at 11 at night, your brain goes, oh, the sun's out, better stay awake. You're basically shining a tiny fake sun into your eyeballs and confusing a clock that's been running the same way since before we were even human. We've hijacked our own sleep system without ever realizing it. Now, let's go inside a night of sleep, because it isn't one flat, unchanging thing. It's a journey. When you sleep, you cycle through stages over and over, roughly every 90 minutes. There's light sleep, there's deep sleep. That's the heavy, restorative stuff, where your body repairs itself. And there's REM sleep, where the vivid dreams happen and your brain files away memories. And here's the fascinating part. You naturally surface toward wakefulness at the end of each cycle. Every single night, you come this close to waking up multiple times. You just usually don't remember it. Waking in the night isn't a malfunction. It's built right into the rhythm. So, when your ancestors woke up for the watch, they weren't broken. They were riding a completely natural rise in their sleep cycle. one that, in long, dark nights before electricity, had room to fully stretch out into an hour or two of calm wakefulness. And there's something special about that in-between state. People in the watch often woke straight out of a dream, and the boundary between dreaming and being awake got blurry and rich. Ekirch even wonders whether our ancestors remembered far more of their dreams than we do, because they were regularly waking up right in the middle of them. Now, compare that to you. You wake up at 3 in the morning, and what happens? Instant panic. Why am I awake? I have to be up in 4 hours. I'm going to be exhausted. What's wrong with me? And that stress, that racing heart, that spiral, is the exact thing that keeps you awake. You're not suffering from the waking, you're suffering from the fear of the waking. Your ancestors woke up and felt peace. You wake up and feel dread. Same event, completely opposite reaction. And the difference is just what you believe is supposed to happen. And why do you believe it? Because for the last century and a half, we've been told that sleep must be one unbroken 8-hour block. Anything less means you failed. That belief is young. It's not ancient wisdom. It was practically invented. And we'll see exactly how in a moment. But first, the flip side of this story, the part that's genuinely helping real people right now. It turns out this piece of forgotten history has become an actual treatment. Doctors working with insomnia patients started sharing Ekirch's research with people who wake up terrified in the middle of the night. And something remarkable happened. When people learned that waking at night was normal for their ancestors, that it might be their body's natural rhythm and not a disorder, a lot of them just relaxed. And when they relaxed, they fell back asleep more easily. The anxiety was the disease, and history was part of the cure. Now, here's a question that takes this even deeper. If splitting up sleep is so natural, do other animals do it too? Because if humans are the only ones sleeping in one big block, maybe we really are special. But if the animal kingdom is full of split sleepers, well, that tells you where the unusual one really is. The answer is that splitting sleep is everywhere in nature. Tons of animals rest in 2, 3, or even many separate chunks across the day and night. And there's a reason for it: survival. If you sleep in one long, deep block, you're a sitting duck. A predator could stroll right up. But if you sleep in shorter stretches with wake-ups in between, you get to check your surroundings. Is it safe? Any threats? Good. Back to sleep. It's like your body running a security patrol all night long. One of the best examples is the ring-tailed lemur, those striped-tailed primates from Madagascar with the big glowing eyes. They're cathemeral, which is a fancy word meaning they're active in bursts, both day and night. And their sleep pattern looks remarkably similar to how pre-industrial humans slept. Which brings us to a second experiment, this one out in the real world. A sleep researcher named David Sampson went to a remote village in Madagascar. No electricity, no streetlights, nights almost as dark as they were thousands of years ago. He gave the villagers activity trackers to record exactly how they slept. What he found was a dip in activity, then a burst of wakefulness right after midnight, around 1 in the morning, and then back to sleep until sunrise. In other words, the two-sleep pattern. Still alive, still happening today in the dark corners of the world where the lights never came. So, think about what we've now got. Old documents from Europe say 2 sleeps. A modern lab experiment recreates 2 sleeps. Animals all over nature do split sleep, and a living village with no electricity still sleeps in 2 shifts. Every single line of evidence points the same direction. The 2-sleep system isn't a myth. It isn't a coincidence. It's the original human sleep. And the 8-hour block, that's the outlier. That's the experiment. And we're the lab rats. So, how did the outlier win? How did the artificial version completely erase something that survived for thousands of years across every continent, backed by our own biology? The answer is one of the most dramatic, accidental transformations in human history. And it starts with a single flame in a London street. Let's lock it in. In this part, we proved the 2-sleep system is real. Dr. Wehr took away artificial light, and modern men's bodies rebuilt the ancient pattern, not just their behavior, but their hormones. We learned that your body clock runs on light, that you naturally rise between sleep cycles all night long, and that your 3 a.m. panic is a modern invention, not an ancient one. We saw that doctors are now using this history to actually help people with insomnia, because sometimes understanding that you're normal is the whole cure. And we saw the 2-sleep pattern echoing through the animal kingdom and living on in a village with no electricity. Which sets up the big one. If darkness is what keeps the second sleep alive, then light is what killed it. And in the 1800s, humanity flooded the night with more light than it had ever seen. On purpose, everywhere. In part 3, we're going to watch it happen in slow motion. The gas lamps, the electric bulb, the factories that suddenly needed workers awake at fixed hours, the alarm clock, and a brand new idea that would reshape the human mind forever. The idea that time is money, and sleeping too much makes you lazy. We're going to watch, almost decade by decade, as humanity slowly and quietly forgets how it used to sleep. And I'll be honest, there's something a little haunting about it. Because nobody chose this. There was no vote, no announcement. An entire species changed one of its most fundamental behaviors and barely noticed it was happening. By the time anyone thought to ask, "Hey, didn't we used to sleep differently?" the answer had already been forgotten. Until a little girl's murder trial brought it back. So, that's part 2. We went from, maybe this is just old stories, to, this is written into your biology right now. Next, the villain of our story finally arrives, and it's not a person. It's progress itself. If this is sitting with you, stay close, because part 3 is where everything you take for granted about your daily schedule gets turned upside down. The science is done. Now, let's watch the world change. So far, we've proven it. For thousands of years, humans slept in 2 shifts, and it's baked right into our biology. But something erased it. Something so powerful it rewrote the sleep of an entire species in just a few generations. And here's the twist that gets me every time. The thing that killed the second sleep wasn't a disaster. It wasn't evil. It was one of the greatest achievements in human history. It's the reason you can read at night, work after dark, feel safe walking to your car. It's light. We conquered the darkness, and in doing so, we accidentally deleted half our sleep. This is the story of the most beautiful mistake we ever made. To understand what changed, you really have to feel how dark the old world was, and I mean genuinely dark. When the sun went down before electricity, the night was a wall. You literally could not see your own hand in front of your face. Light was expensive. A single candle represented real money and real labor. Poorer families made do with smoky rushlights, and even those you rationed carefully. So when night fell, you didn't stay up. There was nothing to stay up for. You went to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock because darkness basically ended the day for you. And that's the secret ingredient: long nights. If you're going to bed at 9 and the sun doesn't rise until 7, that's 10 hours in the dark. You physically cannot sleep for 10 hours straight. So your night naturally split. Sleep, wake for the watch, sleep again. The two-sleep pattern wasn't really a choice. It was what happens when humans meet long, real darkness. Darkness created the second sleep. So watch what happens when we start taking the darkness away. It starts in the early 1800s, in London. For the first time in human history, they light entire streets with gas. Suddenly, the city has a glow after dark. Shops can stay open. People can walk around. The night, which had always belonged to fear and criminals and things people didn't want to think about too hard, starts to belong to ordinary people. It felt like magic. It was magic. But every one of those lamps was quietly telling human body clocks, "Hey, it's not really nighttime yet." And it snowballed fast. Gas lamps in the streets, then in homes. Brighter, cheaper, more everywhere. People did exactly what you'd expect. They started staying up later. Why go to bed at 9 when you can actually see now? Read a Beck. Sew. Talk. Get a little more work done. Bedtime crept from 9 to 10 to 11, later and later. And hiding inside that simple, pleasant change was a quiet catastrophe. You're going to bed later, but you still have to wake up at the same time in the morning for work. So what got cut? The total amount of night. 10 hours of darkness shrank to 7, then 6. And when you compress sleep into a shorter window, the watch gets crushed out of existence. There's no longer room for a peaceful wake-up in the middle. Given less time, your body just packs sleep into one dense, unbroken block. The first sleep grew longer. The second sleep shrank. And that beautiful island of wakefulness in between, gone. Ekirch could actually track this happening almost decade by decade through the 1800s. You can watch the language change in the records. First sleep and second sleep slowly stop appearing. People stop mentioning the watch. Within a lifetime or two, the words themselves fall out of use because the thing they described was disappearing. Language is like a fossil record, and you can literally see the two-sleep world going extinct on the page. But light is only half the story, because at the exact same time, something else was reshaping humanity, the Industrial Revolution. And it didn't just change how we worked, it changed how we thought about time itself. Before factories, most people worked by the sun and the seasons. Farmers didn't clock in. You worked when there was work, rested when there wasn't. Time was loose, natural, human. But a factory runs on the clock. Everyone starts at the same minute. Everyone stops at the same minute. Suddenly, time isn't natural anymore. Time is a schedule. And with the schedule came a brand new idea, one so common today we don't even think to question it. Time is money. Every hour you're not working is an hour wasted. Every hour you're not productive is a loss. And what's the biggest chunk of unproductive time in your whole day? So sleep went from being a natural, sacred part of life to being a problem, an inconvenience, something to minimize. People started praising those who slept less. Waking up early became a virtue, proof that you were disciplined, hardworking, righteous. Sleeping in became a moral failing, a sign you were lazy, weak, squandering your precious productive hours. One London writer literally bragged that a real go-getter could steal a march on all the poor souls still enjoying their second sleep. The two-sleep person had become the punchline, the loser who wasn't hustling. And it got baked into how they raised children. Parents were instructed to train kids to be early risers while they were young, before their habits set. There's an 1829 health journal that basically says, teach children that after their first sleep, they should get straight up. And if they roll over for a second nap, teach them to see it as an intemperance, a lack of self-control, something shameful. Read that again. They were deliberately training the second sleep out of an entire generation, teaching children to feel guilty about the most natural thing their bodies wanted to do. So now you've got the perfect storm. Light lets you stay up late. Factories force you to wake up early. And a powerful new belief tells you that sleeping in 2 shifts isn't just outdated, it's lazy and wrong. 3 forces, all pushing the same direction, all crushing the night into a single block. Against all that, the gentle, ancient 2-sleep rhythm didn't stand a chance. And here's a perfect little symbol of the whole shift: the alarm clock. For thousands of years, humans woke up naturally. The watch, the dawn, no device required. The mechanical alarm clock, as we know it, came along, and irony of ironies, one of the early famous ones was invented by a man who needed to wake up on time to sell clocks. Think about that. We invented a machine to override our own bodies, to force ourselves awake on the factory schedule instead of nature's. The alarm clock is basically the sound of the Industrial Revolution reaching into your bedroom, and you still hear it every single morning. That jolt of adrenaline, that "oh no," that desperate slap at the snooze button, that isn't natural. Your ancestors never woke up like that. That panic is the daily echo of a 200-year-old machine telling your ancient body to hurry up. We didn't just lose a sleep. We replaced peace with panic. Twice. Once at 3 in the morning and once at 7. Then, at the end of the 1800s, comes the knockout blow: electric light. If gas lamps were a candle held up to the night, electric light was a sunrise you could summon at will. Cheap, bright, everywhere, all the time. Now you could flood any room with something close to daylight at any hour you chose. And that was it. Game over for the darkness. The one ingredient that had created the second sleep, long, deep, unbroken night, was gone. You could no longer find real darkness, even if you wanted it. Here's the part that's genuinely a little unsettling. Ekirch argues that artificial light didn't just change our habits, it reached down and rewired our biology. It reconfigured the human circadian clock itself. We didn't just decide to sleep differently. We became a species that sleeps differently. The Industrial Revolution didn't just give us trains and factories and cheaper goods. It changed our bodies. It's one of the only times in history you can point to a technology and say, this literally altered human physiology. And most people walking around today have absolutely no idea it happened. By the end of the 19th century, it was essentially done. The division between the two sleeps had vanished. One unbroken block was now simply how humans sleep. And the wild part? It had happened so gradually, so quietly, that people forgot there had ever been another way. Grandparents didn't tell grandchildren about the watch because the grandparents didn't do it either. 2 or 3 generations and thousands of years of human experience just evaporated. No war, no decree, just forgotten. And then something almost darkly funny happened. Once everyone slept in one block, waking up in the middle of the night became abnormal, a medical problem. Doctors started worrying about it, diagnosing it, treating it. They had a name now for the exact same experience our ancestors had called the watch. That peaceful, natural, sometimes holy hour in the middle of the night. They started calling it insomnia. Let that land. The single most normal thing a human body did for thousands of years, waking calmly in the night, became, in the space of a century, a disorder people take pills for. Not because our bodies changed that fast, because our expectations did. We built a definition of normal sleep so narrow that our own natural rhythm no longer fit inside it. And that's the world you were born into. A world where the watch is a diagnosis and the block is a virtue. We inherited the whole thing without ever being asked. Now, this is important. This isn't an everything modern is bad, throw out your light bulbs kind of story. It really isn't. Because the old world we sometimes romanticize was cold and dangerous. There were fleas and strangers in your bed, and a genuine chance of being murdered during the watch, like Jane's mother was. In a lot of ways, we sleep better now. Safer, warmer, more comfortable than any humans in history. So this isn't about going back. It's about understanding. Because when you understand where your sleep came from, you stop being at war with your own body. And that's the gift hidden inside all of this. In Part 4, I'm going to show you what to actually do with everything we've covered. How this knowledge can change your relationship with those 3 a.m. wake-ups tonight. Whether you can or should try sleeping in 2 shifts yourself. And what real sleep scientists actually recommend. So let's tie it together. The second sleep didn't die of natural causes. It was replaced. Long, dark nights created it. Then artificial light shrank the night. Factories chained us to the clock, and a new belief made sleep something to feel guilty about. Electric light finished the job by erasing darkness itself. And along the way, it rewired our biology. By the year 1900, we'd forgotten so completely that we renamed our ancestors' most peaceful hour insomnia and started treating it like a disease. The watch became a diagnosis. The block became a virtue. And nobody remembered it had ever been the other way around. Which leaves us with the most practical question in this whole story. Now that you know all of this, what do you do with it? Should you throw out your lamps and try to sleep like it's the 1400s? Is 2 sleeping actually healthier, or is it a nostalgic trap? And what about that panic when you wake in the night? How do you actually make it stop? That's Part 4. We get real and practical. Because this was never just a fascinating history lesson. It might genuinely change how you sleep tonight. So, that's Part 3. The beautiful mistake. The invention that quietly rewrote our species. Next, we bring it all home to you. If you've stayed with me this far, you're clearly as pulled in by this as I am. So let's take everything we've uncovered and turn it into something you can actually use. This is where the story stops being about the past and starts being about your next 3 a.m. All right, by now you know the whole incredible story. 2 sleeps, the watch, the lab proof, the light that killed it. But here's where it gets personal, because I know exactly what you're thinking right now. You're lying there, or driving, or doing the dishes, and a little voice is going, "Should I be doing this? Should I split my sleep?" So let's answer it. Honestly, no hype. The internet loves to take a cool fact like this and turn it into a life hack that can mess with your health. I'm going to give you the real, balanced picture, what the science actually says, what the experts warn against, and how you can use this tonight, whether or not you ever split your sleep. Let's start by taking down the single most harmful sleep myth you've probably been carrying your whole life. The myth is this: if I wake up in the middle of the night, something is wrong with me. Wrong. Just wrong. As we've seen, waking in the night is one of the most natural things a human body can do. For thousands of years, it wasn't a problem. It was the schedule. So the very first thing this history gives you is permission. Permission to wake up at 3 in the morning and not freak out. And believe it or not, that permission alone can change your nights. Here's the mechanism, and it's so important. You wake up, you panic, "I'll be exhausted, what's wrong with me?" That panic releases stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline, and those hormones are literally designed to make you alert. So the fear of being awake is what keeps you awake. You're pouring gasoline on the fire and wondering why it won't go out. The waking isn't the enemy. The panic is the enemy. Watch what happens when you swap out that one step. You wake up, and instead of panicking, you think, "Oh, this is just the watch. My ancestors did this every single night. My body's fine. This is normal." No stress spike, no cortisol flood. And in that calm state, you drift right back to sleep, into your second sleep, just like they did. This is literally what sleep doctors now tell insomnia patients, and for a lot of people, it works. Not a pill, not a gadget, just a change in the story you tell yourself at 3 a.m. Think about how wild that is. A piece of history. A historian reading old murder trials became a treatment for a modern medical condition. Because half of what makes middle-of-the-night waking so miserable isn't the waking, it's the meaning we attach to it. Change the meaning, change the experience. So even if you take nothing else from this entire story, take this. Next time you wake at 3 a.m., don't fight it. Don't grab your phone and check the time and start the doom math of only 4 hours left. Just breathe. Tell yourself, this is the watch, and let your body do the rest. Quick but crucial tip inside that: when you wake up, do not look at your phone. 2 reasons. 1, that bright screen is basically a shot of espresso for your body clock. It tells your brain it's daytime. And 2, seeing the time triggers the panic math. 3:47, I have to be up at 6:30. Now you're wide awake and stressed. Your ancestors' watch was lit with dim firelight or moonlight, not a glowing rectangle screaming notifications at you. Keep the dark. Protect the dark. Now, just stay calm is great for the occasional wake-up, but some of you are wondering something bigger. You're thinking, what if I went all in? What if I deliberately structured my life around 2 sleeps like they did? It's a fair question, and the answer is more complicated than the internet wants you to believe. So, let's talk about actually trying it. Here's the fantasy version of 2 sleeping. You go to bed at 9. You sleep till midnight. You wake up for a beautiful, quiet watch. You read, you journal, you have your best ideas. You feel like a serene medieval philosopher. Then, back to bed till dawn. Sounds amazing, right? Productive and peaceful. And honestly, for some people, in the right circumstances, it can be lovely. But here's the giant asterisk nobody mentions. The original two-sleep system only worked because of the conditions around it. Those people went to bed at 9 because there was nothing else to do and they had a 10-hour night to fill. Their second sleep didn't cost them anything. They weren't waking up at 6 a.m. for a commute. They had the time. You don't. If you have to be up at 6:30 for work and you carve a 2-hour watch out of your night, you're not sleeping better, you're just sleeping less. And that's a recipe for genuine sleep deprivation. And this is where the experts get really clear. Ekirch himself, the guy who discovered all this, actively warns people not to run out and artificially split their sleep with alarms. His research is a description of the past, not a prescription for the present. He's a historian, not your doctor, and he says so directly. Because here's the trap. If you set an alarm to force yourself awake at midnight, you're doing the exact opposite of what your ancestors did. Their waking was natural. Yours would be manufactured. Another alarm clock, another machine overriding your body. You'd be recreating the problem, not the solution. So, who might two-sleep make sense for? A few people. Someone with a very flexible schedule. Maybe you don't have a fixed early start. Someone in a season of life with long nights and no rigid morning alarm. Or people who already naturally wake in the night and would rather lean into it than fight it, embracing the watch instead of dreading it. For those folks, riding the natural rhythm can feel wonderful. The key word, always, is natural. Don't force it. Let it emerge. Or don't. But whatever you do, there's one rule that matters more than the shape of your sleep. Get enough total sleep. Whether it's 1 block or 2 shifts, the total hours are what your body actually needs. 2 sleeps that add up to 8 hours? Fine. 1 block of 8 hours? Fine. But cutting your total to squeeze in a fashionable watch, that's not ancestral wisdom. That's just self-inflicted sleep deprivation with a cool historical costume on. Don't sacrifice the amount for the shape. Now, if you are curious to feel your natural rhythm, there's a safe way to experiment. And it's not with alarms, it's with darkness. On a stretch when you don't have early obligations, a long weekend, a vacation, try dimming your lights in the evening, killing the screens an hour or 2 before bed, and letting your bedroom get genuinely dark. That's essentially recreating Dr. Wehr's experiment on a tiny scale. You're giving your body the long, dark night it evolved for, and then just observing what it wants to do. No forcing, pure curiosity. And whether or not your sleep ever splits, you'll probably notice something anyway. Dimming the lights and dropping the screens in the evening makes almost everyone sleep better. Because remember, light is the master switch for your body clock. That one habit is the single most evidence-backed takeaway from this entire story. You don't have to sleep like it's 1450, but you can borrow the darkness, and your ancient body will thank you for it. Okay, let's zoom out a little, because this story isn't only about sleep mechanics. It's about what kind of life we traded away. And there really are some beautiful things we lost with the second sleep. We lost the watch, that quiet, unhurried, screen-free hour that belonged entirely to you. No emails, no notifications, no noise, just stillness, and maybe the person beside you. When in your modern day do you ever get an hour like that? We lost those intimate midnight conversations, the ones that only happen in the dark, half asleep, guard down. We lost a natural built-in time for reflection and prayer and just thinking. People used the watch to sit with their own minds. When's the last time you sat with yours, with nothing pulling at your attention? And here's a haunting one. We may have lost our dreams. Remember, the watch often came right out of REM sleep, so people woke up with dreams fresh and vivid, and had time to actually reflect on them. Ekirch wonders if we simply remember far fewer of our dreams than our ancestors did, because we don't wake up in the middle of them anymore. A whole layer of inner life quietly dimmed. But, and this is important, let's not over-romanticize it, because for every dreamy midnight chat, there was a flea biting you and a stranger snoring in your bed. For every peaceful watch, there was the very real chance of freezing or fire, or someone like Jane's mother being called out into the dark, never to return. The old world of sleep was poetic and brutal. And we shouldn't airbrush the brutal part out just because the poetic part sounds nice. Because look at what we gained. You sleep in warmth. You sleep in safety. You almost certainly aren't sharing your bed with lice or strangers or the constant fear of the dark. Ekirch himself argues that in many ways, this is a golden age for sleep, more comfortable and secure than any humans who ever lived. That's not nothing. That's huge. So the goal isn't to grieve the past, it's to take the best of both worlds. And you can. You can keep your warm, safe, comfortable modern bed and reclaim a little of the watch. Carve out one quiet, screen-free hour in your evening. Protect a pocket of stillness. Let yourself think, reflect. Talk to someone you love without a screen between you. You don't need to split your sleep to get the soul of what the watch offered. The magic was never really about the second sleep. It was about stillness. And stillness is something you can choose right now in the 21st century. So here's where we land, practically. Don't fear the night waking. Reframe it as the watch. Don't force two sleeping with alarms. That just recreates the problem. Do protect your darkness and cut the evening screens. Do get enough total sleep, whatever shape it takes. And do steal back a little stillness while you can. That's how you honor the two-sleep world without pretending you live in it. But we're not quite done. Because there's one final layer to this story, the deepest one. It's not about how you sleep, or even how you feel about it. It's about what this whole forgotten history reveals about human beings. How easily we forget, how quickly normal is rewritten, and what else we might be getting wrong without even knowing it. That's part 5, the final, biggest idea. Stay with me. Let's recap the practical stuff. The most harmful myth is that night waking means something's wrong. It doesn't. The panic is the real enemy, not the waking. So reframe it as the watch and let yourself drift back. Don't force two sleeping with alarms. Even Ekirch warned against that. And never trade your total sleep for a trendy shape of sleep. The safe way to feel your natural rhythm is through darkness, not alarms. Dim the evening, kill the screens, and just observe. And whatever you do, steal back a little of the watch's stillness. Because that quiet hour is the real treasure we lost. We've covered the history, the science, the cause, and the practical takeaways. But there's a final idea that makes this whole story matter beyond sleep. Because if humanity could completely forget something as fundamental as how we sleep, something we did for thousands of years on every continent in just a couple of generations, then what else have we forgotten? What other normal things are actually brand new? What are we doing today, absolutely convinced it's the only way that our great-grandkids will look back on and go, wait, they did what? In Part 5, we go there. The final chapter. And it might change how you look at everything. So that's Part 4, the part you can actually use tonight. If it gave you even a little piece about your own 3 a.m. wake-ups, that already makes this whole journey worth it. But the best idea is saved for last. We've traveled a long way together. We started with a 9-year-old girl blinking awake at 11 at night in 1699 and 2 little words in a murder trial. First, sleep. And from there, we uncovered a forgotten world. 2 sleeps, the watch, an ancient rhythm written into your very biology, erased by light and lost to time. But in this final part, I want to give you the biggest idea of all, because this story was never really just about sleep. It's about memory, about how an entire species can forget itself. And once you truly get that, you can't unsee it. It changes how you look at everything you think is normal. Here's what genuinely unsettles me about this whole story. It's not that we changed how we sleep. Humans adapt, that's fine. It's how fast we forgot we ever did it differently. We're not talking about some tiny, obscure custom. We're talking about a fundamental human behavior practiced for thousands of years on every continent. And it disappeared from human memory in roughly 2 or 3 generations. Grandparent to grandchild, that's it. Blink and thousands of years of shared human experience were just gone. Think about how that actually happens. Your great-great-grandparents slept in 2 shifts and thought nothing of it. Their child grew up as the lights arrived, sleeping in 1 block and never heard the old words. Their child had no idea 2 sleeping ever existed. 3 links in a chain, and a truth that had survived since Homer snapped clean off. There was no book burning, no conspiracy. No one decided to erase it. It just stopped being passed down. And here's the unsettling part. That's usually how forgetting works. Not with a bang, with silence. And if it weren't for one stubborn historian who refused to skip the boring chapter, if Roger Ekirch had just written, "People slept, the end," like he almost did, we might never have known. This entire piece of human heritage was hanging by a thread. It survived only because someone happened to notice 2 odd words in a 300-year-old court record. How much else has already slipped away that had no Ekirch to rescue it? That's a genuinely haunting question. Because think about what history actually is. History isn't the past. History is the tiny, tiny fraction of the past that someone bothered to write down, that then happened to survive, that someone later happened to find and understand. Everything else is gone. The daily texture of billions of human lives, how they felt, how they lived, the things everybody knew. Most of it vanished without a trace. The 2 sleep story is precious, partly because it's a reminder of how much we've lost that we'll never even know we lost. And it flips a question back onto you. You wake up every day certain that the way you live is just the way things are. The 8-hour block, the morning alarm, the commute, the 3 meals, the weekend. You experience all of it as normal, as timeless, obvious, natural. But the two-sleep story proves that your sense of normal is basically an illusion. Almost everything you think is permanent is actually just recent. A snapshot, a moment that feels eternal only because it's the only moment you've ever lived in. Look at how much of your life runs on that same industrial clock that killed the second sleep. The rigid 9 to 5, waking to an alarm instead of the sun, chopping your day into scheduled blocks, feeling guilty for wasting time. None of that is ancient human nature. It's the same 200-year-old machinery that compressed your sleep. We just stopped noticing the cage because we were born inside it. The second sleep is the clue. It's the loose thread, and when you pull it, a lot of normal starts to unravel. Which brings us to the question I promised. If we forgot this, what else are we getting wrong right now, absolutely convinced we're right? Let me give you a few things to sit with. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying any of these are definitely wrong. I'm inviting you to question them. Because the whole lesson of the second sleep is, don't assume the way we do it equals the way it must be.
First, 3 square meals a day. Feels eternal, right? Breakfast, lunch, dinner. But the strict, rigid 3 meals on a schedule pattern is also heavily shaped by industrial work schedules. Humans have eaten in wildly different patterns across history. The clock told us when to sleep. It also told us when to eat. Second, how alone we sleep and live. For most of history, people slept communally. Whole families, sometimes strangers, piled into shared beds in shared rooms. The idea that every person or every couple should sleep in their own private, isolated space is historically brand new. We treat solitude as the default. To our ancestors, it would have seemed bizarre, even unsafe. Isn't it interesting that we invented private, solitary sleep right around the same time loneliness became such a modern epidemic? I'm not saying that's the cause, but it's worth noticing. Third, and this one's the big one, our relationship with light and darkness itself. We are the first humans in history to essentially abolish darkness. Our ancestors spend half their lives in deep, natural dark. We spend almost none. We flood our eyes with light until the moment we close them, and we call it progress. And we're only just beginning to understand what that's doing to our bodies, our sleep, our hormones, our moods, maybe more. We ran a massive, planet-wide experiment on the human nervous system by removing darkness, and we never even realized we were running it. Do you see the pattern? Sleep, food, solitude, light. Over and over, the same story. A thing that was one way for thousands of years, quietly rewritten in the blink of an industrial eye, then forgotten so completely that we mistake the new thing for the eternal thing.
The second sleep isn't a weird historical footnote. It's a lens. And once you look through it, you start seeing invisible normals everywhere. And I think that's genuinely freeing, because if so much of normal is just recent and changeable, then you don't have to accept all of it. You're allowed to ask, does this actually serve me? Or am I just doing it because I was born inside the machine? That's not rebellion, that's awareness. The people of the two-sleep world didn't question their nights, they just lived them. We at least get to know our normal is a choice. That's a kind of freedom they never had. But I want to be balanced one more time. Questioning normal doesn't mean rejecting everything modern. The modern world gave us safety, warmth, medicine, comfort our ancestors could only dream of. The goal isn't to tear it all down and go sleep on a straw floor with the fleas. The goal is to become conscious, to choose deliberately instead of drifting automatically. Take the best of the old, keep the best of the new, and do it on purpose. Which brings us, finally, all the way back to where we started. To Jane, to the candle, to that one quiet, forgotten hour in the middle of the night. Because the deepest lesson of all is hiding right there in the watch. The middle of the night. No work to do, no screen to check, no alarm looming, nowhere to be. Just you awake in the quiet dark with your own thoughts, or the person you love beside you. For thousands of years, humans had that, every single night. A guaranteed hour of stillness built right into the fabric of existence. And now look at us. We are, arguably, the most comfortable humans who have ever lived, and also some of the most restless. We are never bored and never at peace. We filled every silence, lit every darkness, scheduled every hour. We conquered the night so completely that we left ourselves nowhere to simply be. We didn't just lose a sleep. We lost the pause. And that, I think, is the real gift this forgotten history offers you. Not a sleep hack, not a rule, just a reminder that stillness used to be part of being human. That there's nothing wrong with a quiet, dark, undemanding hour. That your ancestors treasured exactly the kind of moment we now fill with scrolling. You don't need to sleep twice to get it back. You just need to let the quiet exist, to stop being afraid of the dark, and the silence, and the pause. So the next time you wake at 3 in the morning, I hope you'll remember Jane, and her mother, and the millions upon millions of people who woke in that same dark hour and felt no fear at all, only peace. I hope you'll think, this is the watch, and instead of reaching for your phone or your worry, you'll just lie there and breathe and let yourself have the pause. Because it turns out that hour was never the problem. It was one of the most human things we ever had. For over 1,000 years, really for as long as there have been humans, we slept twice a night. We woke in the darkness, and we were not afraid. We prayed and talked and loved and thought in a quiet hour that belonged to no one but ourselves. And then we lit up the world, and we forgot. But now you know. You're carrying a little piece of it again, a memory the world almost lost. And maybe that's the most important thing history ever does. Not just tell us what we did, but remind us of who we were, and quietly ask, is the way we live now really the only way? Or is it just the way we happen to live, for now? Something to think about the next time you find yourself awake, in the dark, in the middle of the night. So that's the story. From a murdered woman's testimony in 1699, to a lab in the 1990s, to a village in Madagascar, to your bedroom tonight. For 1,000 years and more, humans slept twice a night. And the fact that you'd never heard of it until now is, honestly, the most fascinating part of the whole thing. If this changed the way you think about your own sleep, even a little, then here's my one small ask. Tonight, when the lights go down, put the phone a little further away. Let the room get a little darker. And if you wake in the night, don't panic. Remember the watch. Let yourself have the pause. See how it feels. And then come back and tell me about it. If you made it all the way to the end of this journey with me, first, genuinely thank you. That means a lot. Drop a comment and tell me, Had you ever heard of the second sleep before this? And be honest, are you tempted to try the watch tonight? I read every one of these, and I love hearing what you think. If you enjoyed this, you'll probably love the other deep dives on this channel about the hidden history behind the everyday things we never question. There's a whole rabbit hole waiting. For 1,000 years, we slept twice a night. We woke in the dark, and we weren't afraid. Now you know why. So tonight, sleep well. And if you happen to wake in the quiet hours, just remember, you're in good company. You always were. Good night.